So welcome and thank you for joining our Smiley Talk, where we're going to be discussing disability inclusion, what people with disabilities experience in our world today in 2021, and also what needs to happen to change it to help build happier societies and communities. So I have two lovely speakers with me today. I've got Trudy and Amelia. And if you have seen our social posting about this talk, we were meant to have three speakers, Cameron from Disability Rights UK, but sadly he's not feeling well, so it's just us three today. But we've got some really important issues to go through, and Trudy and Amelia represent some brilliant organisations. So we've got an hour. We'll have some introductions from our speakers shortly and go into a panel discussion. But if you have any questions, just pop them wherever you're watching, on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and we will be able to get to them nearer the end of the hour. We're Smiley Movement running this Smiley Talk. We're a not-for-profit sponsored by the original Smiley brand, and everything we do has the aim of inspiring people to drive positive change in the world. And we align our work with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So this talk fits in with UN Goal 10, reduced inequalities. And it was also the International Day of Persons with Disabilities last week on the 3rd of December. So we thought it would be a timely topic to discuss for our Smiley Talk. So that's enough from me. I'm going to go to our speakers now. So Trudy, did you want to start and just talk a bit about, well, introduce yourself and your organisation, and maybe briefly about what you do?
Okay, I'm Trudy Beswick. I'm the Chief Executive of Caldwell Children. Caldwell Children started in 2000 and we set up locally in Stoke-on-Trent, but we're now a national charity, and we help children also internationally at our centre, which we've built over the last 4 years, which is a centre to help neurodiverse conditions, particularly autism, on research, intervention and diagnostics. But what do we really do? Well, we help children to become independent, confident through our services with equipment, treatment, therapy. We also help families with fuel poverty. Basically, it's an all-around care service. We've helped over 600 children with conditions, with over 650 different conditions, with over 60,000 children we've actually helped, and services worth over £81 million. So we've really reached an awful lot of children and families, but there's a lot more families and children that need our help over the next decade, 2 decades and further. So we have a lot to do, and obviously a lot to talk about today. So that gives you a little bit of information about what Caldwell Children have done.
Lovely, thank you. And Amelia, did you want to introduce yourself and talk a bit about the organisation that you represent?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Amelia McLaughlin. I'm the Network Director at Disabled Students UK. Disabled Students UK is a rather unique organisation. It's a grassroots organisation made up completely of disabled students from across the UK. And we have over 450 contributors from over 60 different universities. And we work looking at research, influencing research, taking part in research and conducting research, such as our pandemic report, that was kind of mentioned in Parliament, and some of the other kind of research papers that we've done recently and helped out with. We also look at kind of the student voice and amplifying things that are happening at individual institutions and supporting disabled students, officers at student unions, as well as doing some training with NUS and other kind of big organisations. And our aim is really to kind of reinforce the legislation for disabled students to make sure that they have equity in their education and equity in their kind of experience of higher education as a student. So that's basically what we do, really.
Lovely, and we'll hear more about the sort of maybe more of the day-to-day work that you both do in your organisations during the talk. But to kick things off now, the first question I wanted to ask is, and it's a very big question, is what do people with disabilities experience in 2021? Now, I know we could probably talk for the whole hour talking about their experiences, but I wondered maybe from your work or your own experiences, if you could highlight some of the things that perhaps able-bodied people wouldn't realise that people, children, students with disabilities experience in our world. So Amelia, perhaps maybe did you want to start and sort of kick off and maybe share some insight?
Yeah, so I think kind of the most important thing to remember is kind of disabled students, like all students, just kind of want to do the same thing everybody else wants to do, really. I don't think there's any kind of specialist thing that disabled students want to do separately to anybody else. And I think one of the barriers that we're seeing is kind of the lack of support, not only for kind of accessing your education and your academics, but also the wider student experience. Which is interesting given that there's actually an increase of disabled students in the sector, and it's been increasing quite significantly year on year. And so the experience is very much kind of students coming through the education system towards higher education, having a fairly good idea of what they want to get out of higher education, but often finding the kind of small kind of but impactful differences that mean that they're not necessarily able to contribute or participate in that education as much as they would if they weren't disabled. But often that is a very different experience from individual to individual. So there is no real way of kind of giving a panacea of what the experience is for disabled students across HE.
Yeah, and I can like the differences will be so individual, but the resounding factor is they're still facing those sort of barriers or challenges. Trudy, now Caldwell Children, is it right that you work with people up to the age of 25? Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And sort of following on from what Amelia just said, obviously as a student, the next stage in your life is to actually get employment. And it's really sad to think that actually people with disabilities are 30% lower than people with disabilities in employment. So it's about the understanding of employers giving them access to enable people to get access to employment. Now, I know that, inclusion and diversity is a really big subject and people are talking about it, but we've actually got to enable them to gain access to employment. And so, we've really got to start making a difference and getting the government. It's one of the things that we're working with. And over the pandemic, we were working with digital services to enable people with disability to get that employment. But it's a huge area to be discussing and to open up because, it's such a big problem in this across the world.
And would you say what you just said there about more people are talking about inclusion and diversity when it comes to employment, but also in general, in your work and your experiences, do you think the conversation has increased in the past few years when we talk about enabling equality for people with disabilities, or is it just talk and less action?
Talk is developing. But I think I would like to see more action. Certainly people are coming to us to say, what do we need to do? But it's a cultural change. Yeah. It's not just about putting a piece of paper in place and saying we want to do it. It's a total cultural change. And this is what we're trying to get across to corporates and get across to organizations. You've got to change the way you interview. You've got to change what you're actually doing. You've got to train your staff to understand what conditions are, what disabilities are, what you need to put in place. You've got to have the facilities within your organizations, quiet rooms. You've got to, staff need to understand, and there's a lot to be done. It's not as simple as saying, oh, we've got a diversity and inclusion policy. It's not that. It's not ticking a few boxes. And I'm sure Amelia will agree with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I couldn't say that better myself, actually. I think it raises a really good point. And yes, EDI is, a really impactful area that there's lots of conversations going on in the sector. But I have to say, I don't think there's the level of depth of understanding and conversation for disability specifically. And what we're seeing from the student point of view is disabled students are very much leading the way in raising this issue at their institutions. It's not really coming from the institutions themselves. And I think what we would advocate is for, this to be led by disabled people, because a lot of these positions where you get training and kind of companies are very much led by non-disabled people, and a massive kind of leg up would be that, you know, people actually start hiring disabled people to lead on disabled issues. And at the moment, we're still seeing a very kind of charities model whereby kind of it's being done for disabled people, not by disabled people. And I think what we're seeing in the higher education sector is massively qualified disabled people in multiple kind of areas and disciplines, but still can't get employment because they're seen as less than because of their disability. And I think there is this massive cultural block of people not being able to see disabled people as both experts and disabled. And I think that's the issue that we're kind of grappling with, both in higher education specifically, but actually across society as a whole.
Yeah. And something sorry, did you want to add something on there onto Trudy?
I think that's very much the difference why people are coming to us, because actually the organisations that we're working with the young people that we actually work with to actually get involved with the projects that we're dealing with, so that they actually understand how they're feeling. It's that engagement. It's that engagement with young people. It's that engagement with people with disabilities that they actually need. Otherwise, they don't really understand what they've got to change around their businesses or their organisations. They need that communication. They need that involvement, and that's exactly what we're putting together with them, so that they understand what they've got to change, understand how they've got to change the wording in their projects, in their CVs, in their organisation, really.
And something you're both doing, obviously, with your organisations is trying to instigate change and drive that awareness. And you both mentioned briefly what your organisations do, sort of given an overview. But I wondered if you could talk, perhaps go into a bit more detail about how your charity or your organisation really is like trying to push that change forward and drive awareness. So Trudy, for example, I know you were just saying about you work with corporates. So is that sort of a big part of Caudwell Children and its mission?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, every single service that we do arrives or derives from the families and the children that we work with. Otherwise, we wouldn't actually develop them. So our stakeholder engagement and our involvement with all the young people and the children, in fact, it's quite unique. We've been 21 years an organisation, and the young children that we helped in the early days, one of them has just become one of our trustees. My vision for the future would be that they actually run the charity in the future. And I said that to the kids when they started our CAN group, which is our Children's Activities Network. They actually designed all of our branding, our website, and actually when we built this building, they were key designers in the building and told us and gave us the projects that they needed to see, and developed the interiors and the exteriors with us. They're key in driving this charity forwards because they know what they need, as well as their parents and their guardians, and that's why it's such a calming facility. Which is all about neurodiversity and autism. And every single service that we have is because the families and children need them and because of their involvement. And it's exactly the same. We have services for what's required today, but every single one of those services has an element about what it should change for society, the future, whether it's education or the health service. And coming back to the original conversation, you know, we've got huge waiting lists because of the pandemic, and we're trying to work out how those waiting lists can be efficiently reduced. And that's something that Caudwell Children are working on with the families, with the children, because they tell us what the issues are. We work with them to resolve those issues, and then work with policy and government and reports to say how they can spend their money better. And that's exactly how we try to change societal issues moving forwards.
Yeah. And Amelia, what's Disabled Students UK? I mean, it's a very new organisation, and it's set up, as you said, out of a need for not having sort of a similar thing elsewhere. Did you want to talk a bit about how like when it was set up and sort of the day-to-day, how you support students and try and drive?
So absolutely. So we were set up kind of just before the pandemic. So all of our directors didn't know each other before kind of pandemic times, and kind of came together quite organically while we were all studying kind of in those trying times as disabled students, and really found that there was no kind of disabled student-led organisation that was uniting students from across the country. And we really felt that we could kind of share our experiences and kind of be a collective force in the sector. As I think Trudy said, like, disabled students know what needs to be done and needs to be changed. And so that's kind of how we kind of came about as a collective organisation. I think in the day-to-day running, our kind of main kind of policy points are around research and really instigating research, conducting our own, but also working with academics across the country to kind of aid in that research and make sure that the kind of disabled students' voice is authentic and is taken into account, but also kind of looking at kind of policy and working with disabled people's organisations and kind of stakeholders in the sector to make sure that kind of disabled students are there. And I think we are quite unique in the fact that it's not just our directors that kind of get involved in that work, but anyone that would like to contribute is always open to kind of presenting their research or getting involved in policy or any of our activities. And for example, we're kind of about to launch a podcast project so that kind of individual voices of disabled students are heard from across the country and get the opportunity to talk about what disabled students would like to talk about. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of different things, and a lot of our projects and day-to-day activities actually generated by our contributors and disabled students themselves. So it's a bit hard to kind of summarize everything we do because it's always changing. And that's a really positive thing, of like, we're really kind of responding to the community that's coming together, and we're hoping to continue to do that in everything that we do, no matter how big or small we end up in the sector.
Yeah, and spotlighting the work that you have both done. Amelia, I know it's only been a year, and Trudy a lot longer, but did you want to highlight any success stories or any examples of where your organisation has done some work and it's had an impact, and you've sort of seen that impact, and I'm sure felt grateful that the organisation you work for is helping drive that change? Trudy, maybe you wanted to go first. What would you say is Caldwell Children's biggest success story, if you could call it that? Or perhaps, I wonder if it's perhaps the facility you're sitting in now.
Yeah, I suppose, do you know what? I get asked this question so often. If you met my team would say Trudy's never happy, because she always wants to help more and more and more. And that is the truth. Yeah, you know, this facility is phenomenal. You know, it's a huge tick in the box because it's an £18 million project, and it is reducing the waiting lists for children with autism. We've worked all the way through the pandemic, continually reducing the waiting lists in the Midlands area, and it's creating an efficient pathway for autism. And we have also helped children internationally as well to come here, and we are sharing that. We're working with the NHS to reduce their waiting lists as well, and that's absolutely phenomenal. We want 4 of these across this country, and then we want to also do a project which is training other psychologists, OTs, speech and language, and we're looking into that this year, which is obviously helping other organisations nationally, because that is also a huge issue, that we do not have enough of those individuals in this country. And we will not be able to reach all the children and families that need help unless we actually tackle it from that end. And we will be working and talking to the government about that. But what have we actually achieved? Well, it's every single child that we've actually supported and changed their life, or helped them from any single point of view, and seeing their, you know, I know it sounds, and I'll get really emotional if I get into every single child. We've just done a ball and I ended up in tears on stage. because that's what makes the difference. We help one child, one family at a time, and we know them individually, and when you've helped as many families as we have, then you can say that's a phenomenal achievement. But when you look at how many families need more help, then that makes you feel you've got to just keep going. And our fundraising was hit massively over the pandemic, massively, as I sort of was speaking to you about earlier. So, and we don't know what the pandemic is going to do next year or the year after. And we really rely on face-to-face fundraising. So we were very lucky to just do our ball in London recently, but we couldn't do it for 2 years previously. So, times are really tough. We're not a big brand on the internet, on digital and social media. So we really do need everybody's support to do what we do. Every single penny that we raise goes directly on children because our management and administration is paid for by John Cordwell. So, and we double every single pound because we're efficient in the way that we actually do. There's not many charities, as Mimi was saying, there's some really unique charities out there, and we're one of those. So what I am proud of is the people that are supporting us and the team that are delivering the services. That's what I'm really proud of. But we want to expand and we want to help more children. And I will always put that caveat on the end. So my team will say Trudy's never happy. Reaches and helps every kid. So
I can imagine it's hard to sort of get that balance, sort of reflecting on what you've done, but looking at what you've got to achieve and still having that motivation to keep going and doing more, because you look back at what you've done already and you think, well, maybe we could do this. This is hard to just...
I am proud that we created a huge amount of new services over the pandemic, and the team converted over to digital. And we also did door drops of equipment. We created a new service called Get Sensory, which was a lot of the OT, well, all the OT services were stopped over the pandemic, and we created a pack which we dropped into the home, and then they rang up our clinical service and they got that OT service clinically and by on digital. And we did a chat bot, and we also did it on telephones, and everybody worked towards that. And we've supported over 7,500 children on that, and we've helped over 11,500 children this year. So, and that's the most children we've ever helped in 1 year. So, and hopefully we'll have a lot more next year with the support of the fundraising that hopefully we'll be able to do. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. And Amelia, much more of a younger organisation, so this you don't have as much experience to go back on, but in the year that Disabled Students UK has been an organisation, what positive or success stories can you reflect on that you've experienced, or that you think that you've achieved?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, and the thing that we keep kind of coming back to, is very much that we've gone from kind of 4 people to over 450 within our organisation.
Wow.
And that's literally just the community of disabled students themselves coming together. And I think that's the biggest kind of success we could have hoped for in terms of supporting our community and actually creating that community. But I think for the tangible things that we have done and achieved, it's definitely kind of our pandemic report that we issued earlier in the year as the pandemic was first kind of coming upon us, and that being kind of featured in kind of parliamentary questions and debates, and that kind of really demonstrating how disabled voices are being heard at the highest levels of legislation, but also kind of literally just kind of creating access insights to our project around using disabled students' individual experiences to create profiles of individual institutions and see how we can help there on an individual level, and just so many kind of things and projects that we've kind of managed to achieve over the year, which kind of was demonstrated by our nomination and success with the Shaw Trust Power List, which we are now featured on. And I think we are one of the first organisations to be featured on that list, which is, we weren't expecting, we don't do this for accolades, we do this for our community. And I think our kind of ambition going forward is, You know, we want to be a kind of self-sufficient, self-funding organisation. At the moment, we are a CIC, and we are a CIC, so a community interest company for political reasons, as we believe that disabled students are experts in their field, they are experts in their academic fields, and therefore we want to really be recognised for that value and contribution that we give society. And we do think that not only are we kind of doing work within the interest of our specific community, but also within society as a whole, to really kind of give disabled students that platform to really kind of blossom and develop. And yeah, so it's our kind of ambition to kind of obtain some funding and hire as many people to be kind of as self-sufficient as possible.
So a lot achieved in a year, but a lot of aims that you want to achieve going forward, which is really wonderful to hear. Thinking about what needs to change in society as a whole, I mean, there is a lot that needs to change to move forward. But are there any things that you could pick out that if you had to sort of focus on some of the changes that you'd like to see in the next 5 years when it comes to awareness or what people know and the knowledge that people have around what people with disabilities face? Is there anything that you could pick out? Amelia, perhaps you could take this one first, that you could pick out that you think you would like to see in the next few years?
Yeah, so I think my first thing, and actually we were talking about this at DSUK not that long ago actually, is just the simple attitudinal change of expecting disabled students to be within higher education, or expecting disabled people to be present in society. Because I think the biggest kind of shift that we see is a lot of services and a lot of kind of support is kind of based on a kind of add-on like model, and actually not many things have universal design built in to kind of accommodate for disabled people across the board. And so for higher education in particular, what we would really like to see is, you know, the sector as a whole kind of expecting disabled students to be not only at kind of undergrad level but postgrad level, and even going forward towards the pipeline of actually supporting disabled staff and academics within the sector, because we know that they're there, but we also know that there's incredible barriers for them staying in the sector and really kind of thriving and supporting the community as a whole.
Yeah. And Trudy, I'm just going to direct that same question to you. If you're thinking about sort of changes in society that you would want to see in the next 5 years, what do you think you would really want to see?
What I would love to see is, in general, public's understanding of disability. You know, I think that people don't understand disability and the general understanding of each other, because I think then we would have a more inclusive society. You know, hidden disabilities, I don't think they really understand what disability really is. There's physical disability, neurodisability, you know. I think that that's quite difficult to get out there. So there's a big educational piece there, right, starting from when kids are in school, in the employment sector. You know, if we get that right, then I think we would just have a totally better inclusive society all around. And it's a big ask, it's a big vision. But if we all worked at it at every angle, in the health sector, the way that everybody is treated, then if we understand that, and you know, I say this to a lot of people, we understand we're all different in all our ways, and accept that, then we might not have a prejudice when we meet each other, or a preconceived idea of what we're expecting. And then we'd be much more open-minded about each other.
Yeah, if I could just come in on that, because I think that's such a good point. I think, again, we were having these discussions, and these discussions we have at kind of Disabled Students UK kind of constantly. But I think there is this kind of myth, or this misconceptualization, that there is kind of disability on one hand and normality on the other. And I think the reality of, you know, us all being human beings is we're all limited in some capacity. We all need support in some capacity. And so really that's what unites us as, you know, a society and as a people, whether you kind of describe or declare a disability or not. It's that kind of flexibility of kind of thought and understanding around what is the best way for you to do things and the best way for you to be supported. And I don't actually think that that's limited to kind of disabled people. I think that's kind of a thing that's applicable to all people. And I think if we kind of stopped having this kind of separation of disabled and non-disabled and started thinking of ourselves as how best we can support each other in our mental health or our physical abilities or intellectual abilities or whatever it is, I think we'd kind of get to a lot better position as a society to kind of really make some kind of positive change for like everyone, really.
It's a really good point.
It's absolutely right, and this is where we start from when we do our understanding right from the beginning. Is everybody's asked the same questions. Everybody should be understanding when they actually come in through the door. How can we help? What do you need from us? You know, it's the same questions for everybody, you know, and this is part of the training process for diversity and inclusion. You know, it isn't about saying, do you have a disability? It's about what can we do for you? What do you need from this process? What do you need from this interviewing process? What do you it's not asking them specifics about, as you've just said, you know, it's just simply caring about each other. That's all.
And a lot of the things that you both said about sort of making this change in society, a lot of it, like Trudy, you said, it's about education in schools as well. So it comes from people a lot higher up than the everyday person who might be watching this and thinking, well, what can I do? So are there any sort of things that you would say to an individual, whether they are a person with disability, whether they're able-bodied, and they're watching this and wondering, what can I do? Where would you direct them, whether that's like supporting your organization, what you might need, or in general in society to help us build these happier communities and societies? What can people do to sort of make their mark? Now, every individual doing something small could add up to something, but a lot of people think, well, on my own, is there much I can do?
Yeah, I'll just make a point, actually, because it's been said to me a lot, and I bet, Amelia, it's been said to you. If you reverse the question, is people have said to me, I don't know how or what to say to people with a disability. I don't know how to act. And that's part of the problem, because they don't have the interaction maybe when they were at school or what to do. And I've had it said to me 1,000 times, and I say, why? You know, and that's the thing. So the easiest thing to do is go and work with someone like ourselves. Go and work with someone like Amelia's organisation, because that's what you do in general life. You know, if you want to go and do sport, you go and do it. If you want to go, you know, because that's the only way. And if you're an organisation, that's what you need to do. You need to do that, because, you know, society out there is made up of all individuals, and your organisation needs to be represented by all sorts of individuals. And unless you do, you don't connect with society nowadays. And that's my point. And that's our point at Cordwell Children. We can help you do that, and there'll be other organisations help you do that. But, you know, of course, come to us or come to all meetings, because we're the ones talking about it. We're the ones that know about it. But there will be other organisations out there as well, as they say on TV. So, yeah, we can help. Amelia can help, you know. But the thing is, get involved. If you want to know about it, get involved. That's the best way of doing it. Face your fears. Because most of the time, you know, that's the problem. If you don't know about it and you don't interact, then hiding or sticking your head in the sand isn't going to help.
Yeah, absolutely. I can agree more. I think as well, I would say, to add on to that, I think it's really important to remember that, like, people with disabilities are not any different to people without. Like, we all want, you know, a stable family, a house, a job, you know, security. We want kind of relationships. Like, anything anybody else wants in life is generally what a disabled person wants in life, because we want the same things. I think what I would say to people, whether you're disabled or non-disabled, is kind of don't be afraid to kind of challenge your assumptions. Like, we all carry around kind of ableism and unconscious bias, and, you know, as the disabled community, like, we're always unpacking that stuff. And to us, you know, it's a really interesting conversation and it's a really powerful conversation. But we also understand that most non-disabled people find that a really scary conversation. And so don't be afraid of it. Like, we all make mistakes. We all have kind of our own biases. But I think, as like Trudy was saying, like, there are hundreds of kind of disabled led organizations. If you're kind of particularly interested in like higher education, like, we are always happy to kind of have contributors that identify as disabled or want to learn more. And if you're a kind of institution or a university, we're more than happy to do kind of paid consulting, and we have like very unique ways of, if you are, for example, a university, ways of connecting your organization with your own disabled students and really creating that kind of sustainable communication within your own like local communities of disabled students, to really start kind of forging those relationships and making a kind of meaningful and, as I said, like sustainable change.
Yeah, definitely. We've actually had some questions come through in the last few minutes, which I'll go through. And one of them actually touches on what you mentioned, Trudy, about hidden disabilities. So someone has said, not all disabilities are visible. How do we raise awareness on that? What would you say to that?
I think, again, it's through the education sector, the health sector, through doing lots of webinars and talks, you know, and that's what Code Our Children are doing, you know, through working with corporates, through ensuring that people understand what hidden disabilities means. We're actually talking at the UN. We're talking with policy making through the government. It's actually our families and our children and our young people that are actually working to talk with organisations and people what it means to them, and that's really important. Yeah. We do talk. We're actually on a university campus. We're talking with the university. We're doing a lot of research as well with lots of university campuses, and saying what it means and what changes is required. I'm actually changing the building policies, how buildings should be used, because of the building that we did here. It's not just about physical disabilities, it's also about neurodiverse conditions, which is obviously hidden disabilities. It's really, really important, because for years I don't think people really understood or knew about, as you're saying, know about hidden disabilities or understand them. And we've had a lot of people come to us and saying we really need to understand. So it's not that people don't want to understand it, they do, and we've got to raise the awareness of that, which is exactly what we're achieving at Code Our Children. So if you do want to get involved, then contact us on www.codeourchildren.com or contact us on social media to get involved, to help us to raise the awareness of hidden disabilities, because that's definitely what Code Our Children is all about, as well as physical disabilities.
And Amelia, is raising awareness of hidden as well as physical, is that something that you've come across or that's been part of Disabled Students UK in the past year?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually a very ongoing discussion within the disability community in general. And I think it's really important, again, to point out that the first barrier in this conversation is people are assumed to be non-disabled until they declare a disability. And I think if we can just change that mindset to kind of not just assuming that, everyone is kind of non-disabled until they out themselves, would be a really positive step. Because I think invisible disabilities make up over 90% of the disabled community. And so, that is the kind of majority that we're talking about. And the one barrier that many people with invisible disabilities face is that they're not believed to be disabled because there's no kind of visible sign. Even me, I know that I'm kind of speaking for Disabled Students UK, and so from that you will kind of probably work out that I am disabled, but on this Skype call you can't see that I'm physically disabled. When you see my physical kind of tag of a wheelchair, you don't see my dyslexia or my chronic illness. So actually people can have both invisible and visible disabilities at the same time, and disabilities are complex. I think it's just that having that baseline kind of assumption that anyone you meet can have a disability or can have like special need or a limitation, however they kind of term that. And so it's around making people as comfortable as possible and as kind of making things as accessible to them as possible. And so within the disability community, we're trying to kind of go away from the kind of labeling of kind of invisible or visible disabilities, because actually what we're trying to express is a kind of the variation of access rather than kind of trying to pin things to specific impairments.
It's a really important point that you said about people are assumed non-disabled perhaps until they declare it, and there's that baseline assumption that someone is fine until they say they're not. And I think what you said, maybe it's that mindset shift of not just assuming, and it's those automatic thoughts and unconscious biases that we have in our minds that we need to sort of change and understand and shift it, which sometimes can take a while to get that mindset shift.
That's why we've got to make everybody understand that we treat everybody the same and ask them the same questions. What's your need? How can I help? You know, and that's why you don't, as we've had the conversation before, we don't treat people saying, do you have a disability? Don't you have a disability? It's about how can we help? What do you need? It's really simple, and it works. We do it here. It's really simple. It works. It doesn't put people on the back foot as soon as you start.
Yeah. And something sort of touching on that, and also what you said earlier about the workplaces, one of the questions is, what are your thoughts on quotas for disabled people in the workplace? How does that sit with you, Trudy? Perhaps you can take that.
I would prefer that organisations realise the value of having a diverse workforce and how creative thinking individuals are, because it's amazing as a dyslexic, and I'm dyslexic, it's amazing as how, and I didn't realise for many years, I just thought everybody thought like this. So I think, and it was actually one of my team members who worked very close to me, and I said, why doesn't everybody think like this? I think really big picture. I draw a lot, and I think in charts and graphs, and I see things, and I thought everybody did it. But I obviously struggle in other ways. So, and over the years, I've come to be able to work like that. But I clearly add value to the team, and I've got a lot of people with hidden disabilities in my team, and they add massive creatives to the team, and I want more people in my team, because that's what society is like. And I think that it's not about saying I want a woman on a board, or I want a X, Y, and Z, or a Z, and it makes up like, that's not how it should work. You need to see the individuals for their creativity, for what they achieve, and just say, what support does everybody need? We all need support in a team. Everybody. You might need quiet place, you might this, but they're good for everybody. You know, these environments that we built here have made the environment for everybody better, and whatever we bring in and continue to bring in makes it better for everybody. And the sooner everybody realizes that, and that'll be the same for the shopping environments, wherever we actually go, quiet place, or whatever we actually do, is better for society. I actually said, if we work with autistic people and neurodiverse people, this will be a better environment for everyone in the team, everyone. And I was right. I was absolutely right. And the creativity that was brought to this building was right. And if we could develop that across the country, it'd be great. And everybody comes here, says the same. We've got educational people who are building schools coming here. We've got people who are bringing health organisations here. And that's what we need to do. And it's the same with the teams. We just need to prove to people, they just need to think more open-mindedly. That's all. Oh, if that's the right way of putting it. Quotas aren't the right thing to do. Quotas aren't the right thing to do.
Yeah.
It's not right.
And what you said about it helping everyone, you think about a lot of supermarkets now are bringing in this quieter hour for potentially for people with autism, but it just made me think then there were so many people that would benefit from going there. It's not just people with autism that will benefit going to a supermarket.
Loud music blaring away when you're trying to sort your list out and you've forgotten your veg. Do you know what I mean? You've got to go back. It's like, and you're already busy and you've had a stressful day and somebody's blaring music out at you. I mean, maybe I'm just going old. I don't know, but I don't need it. Yeah.
No, absolutely. But I think it's an important point. I think the goal behind it is kind of a positive thing. It's like trying to get people in the door. But I think it's important to remember that with the disability and with the stigma that's around disability, just because you are in a workplace doesn't mean that you are supported or valued within that workplace. And so the quota kind of doesn't really quite achieve what it's meant to. And I think actually it's almost kind of going a step back and going, well, we have a lot of incredibly qualified disabled people across the sectors in this society. Why are they not getting the jobs in the first place? And I think if we're being honest, there is a lot of discrimination whereby as soon as you declare a disability, then people start looking at you differently and maybe not looking at your kind of qualifications in the same way they would if they were looking at you if you weren't a disabled person. So I think it's not really about the disabled person and their skills. Disabled people across the country are incredibly talented. Like the students we see across higher education, like generally if they are, maintained in their education, so manage to finish their degree, get very high quality degrees, master's degrees, PhDs, become academics. It is the attitude that they face when they declare, because they are seen as other and different and kind of less than, if we're being honest, that is the problem. It's not necessarily that they're not capable of doing the work that they're trained to do.
And this attitude shift, some people say having more representation of people with disabilities may help. And a question that someone has asked is, do you think people with disabilities have enough representation in media? And I'm guessing the answer, enough is quite a big word to say, but is it getting better, would you say, the representation in the media? Have you seen or heard or seen people having discussions about disability more because it's been in the media?
I think it's an interesting one. So I would use, if anyone's familiar with Doctor Who, there was a really good episode of Doctor Who a couple of years ago where one of the characters was actually deaf. And at no point was the character's deafness the point of the plot. It just happened that she was a captain of a ship and she happened to be deaf and her first language happened to be British Sign Language. I think that kind of representation is incredibly important, whereby we're not tokenized as disabled people for the disability that we have, but actually we are just integrated into society doing what we want to do, whether that's work, have a family, have an education, what everybody else is doing. And I don't think there's enough representation of that form of kind of disability representation where we are just the same as everybody else doing what everyone else is doing, and that is seen as normal. I do think there's a sadly overrepresented representation of disabled people being seen as objects of charity and objects of kind of pity, if we're being honest. And I think that really damages the community and really reinforces the idea that we are instead of talented, capable human beings, that we're somehow less than. And I think that in terms of representation, it's really important that we are representing the right things within disability and representing our humanity, if nothing else.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Trudy, what would you say?
I'd actually totally agree with Amelia there. And I think the only way to make it better is that there are more represented, because I think then if there's more, then it becomes equal placed. So I think that's the answer to the question. Yeah.
And just something that I've thought while you were answering that, Amelia, is that in sex education, I don't know if people have seen it, but they recently had a storyline. Well, I'm just catching up, I'm a bit late, of a person with disability, and there was a lot of stories about it, about this storyline, and it was great representation. Well, it was great that they included a person with disabilities in this show, which was really popular. But it made me think what you were just saying, how because of the so much coverage about it, it made it seem like it was unusual. I don't know if you agree. I was just thinking as you were talking then, like rather than it just being another character, it was. Now it's hard because I think it's great that they had that, but there was also that side of what you said, of.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reaction to it, and I think I'm a bit like you, I'm a bit behind on the storyline, so I'm not going to comment too much on that, because I haven't seen it yet. But I think there is that side of the shock from wider society of, oh my God, there's a disabled character that has a sexual relationship. And it's that kind of, not tokenization from like the storyline, and I think the storyline from what I've heard was quite positive. I think it's the reaction to it, and actually just like interestingly, so it's currently Disability History Month, and one of the themes of Disability History Month for this year is actually like sexual health and relationships, and I think that is one part of what is a very natural part of our human lives that disabled people are very much cut out of or not assumed to participate in. And especially when you talk about kind of students, obviously sexual health, exploring your identity, exploring who you want to be as a person is a massive part of that journey for students. And again, there's not necessarily the support in the same way for disabled students to kind of explore that part of their identity and who they are.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I suppose we've got to see this as an education piece as well, because unless these sorts of things occur on TV, then the wider public won't be able to ask the question, understand the question, see what's actually going on. So I suppose we need to just go, well, at least they're having, at least they're seeing this going on, they're understanding it, and then that's the only way that more individuals get the opportunity to take part in these TV programs, etc. I don't watch a lot of TV, by the way, so I don't get chance.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But at least it's actually happening, and they're getting the answers, because it's a bit like my son's school. They this was a long time ago. They didn't have any children with disabilities, so they bought some dolls. I saw these dolls, nearly went a bit pear-shaped, and said, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring some children in, they can ask questions, and then the school teacher said, are there any questions off limit? And all the children have actually they were actually ambassadors for us, and they didn't mind any conversations. And of course the kids, because they were only young, asked all sorts of questions, which was brilliant, and some of them was, do you want children? What can you actually have? And all this sort of thing. And how does your kit work? And the teachers are like going, oh my God, I can't believe they asked those questions. I said, well, how else are they going to do? They'd ask questions like that of any other children. So why wouldn't they? And this is the problem. This is exactly the problem. And this is why that, everybody needs to just be able to do this. So I suppose having this on TV helps. It will help. And then it becomes better to be able to have more information out to the television, more people get involved, more people with disabilities, and hopefully it'll get better in the future.
Yeah, and hopefully more characters.
Yeah, this is the thing I was going to say. So, like, I think it's not that it's not there. I think it's still somewhat tokenized because it's not there enough. And I think if you think about like something like what 1 in 5 people in the UK have a disability, like we don't see 1 in 5 actors on TV being disabled, whether that's invisibly disabled or visibly disabled. I would like to see more kind of storylines where the person just happens to have a disability, but they are a doctor or a lawyer or just going about their day, and you kind of see their kind of disability issues and barriers kind of as an incidental rather than it being a big kind of overblown often kind of storyline.
Yeah, but that should come, shouldn't it? The more it happens, the more it should come. I suppose back in the day, there was no women in there, so I suppose that happened. It should come, and you'll sort of see it. If we do things right, if we raise awareness, if we keep, speaking the way we're speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have 1 or 2 minutes left, so I'm just going to come around both of you quickly and say what one thing do you want people listening to take away from this talk, and where can people go to find out more? So Amelia, did you want to kick off?
Yeah, so I think like if you're interested in this, if this is, you know, disability issues are a bit scary or you want to get more involved, look up your kind of local disabled persons organisation, kind of get stuck in really. It doesn't have to be a lot of commitment. If you're interested in higher education in particular, feel free to get in touch with us. I think our information is just being kind of beamed over to you. And we're more than happy to kind of take on kind of consultation, research, or just individual students that want to get a bit more involved in the kind of situations that we're dealing with and kind of helping improve the sector for all disabled students across the UK.
Lovely, thank you. And Trudy, what one thing do you want people to take away, and what can they do if they want to find out more about Called Wild Children?
Well, if you need support, equipment, treatment, therapy, or any of our support that I talked about earlier, go on our website, which is there, or you can call us on 03453 001 348 and talk to one of our family support members, or you can go on our Twitter, which is @CalledWildChildren, or Facebook, which is Called Wild Children, and learn all about us. So you can either get support through our services, or please support us to fundraise for us, get involved. There's lots and lots of things on our website that you can actually do. Our Get Sensory Pack, you know, £3, £5 would really help a child over Christmas. That's our Christmas support, and help us throughout 2022. We'd really love to hear from you.
Lovely, thank you. And we'll make sure to include links to Disabled Students UK and Called Wild Children on our Twitter page, including the helpline that Trudy just said, so you can get all the information there. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining the talk and giving up your lunchtime for us. I think it's been a really important and incredible discussion. And for everyone listening, thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day.